Hi, my name is Cameron Goodman, and you're watching Nicheville's YouTube channel, where we fill the niche with people of color. This video is part of the Cam's Corner series, where I discuss speculative fiction media at length. In this first episode, I'm going to be talking about humanity as it is defined in Philip K. Dick's novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and the two movies that inspired Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is a 1968 science fiction novel by Philip K. Dick. It chronicles the experiences of Rick Deckard, a bounty hunter who executes escaped humanoid robots referred to as androids. One day, Deckard is tasked with executing a gang of highly advanced Nexus 6 androids. These androids abandoned their positions as servants to the colonial human population on Mars, murdered several people, and escaped to Earth. Deckard hopes the job will earn him enough money to buy his wife a live animal to replace her one electric sheep. More on the electric sheep later. Deckard begins his mission by visiting the Rosen Corporation, the company that manufactures the Nexus 6 models, to determine whether or not the Voight-Kampff test, a test designed to determine if a subject is able to feel empathy and is therefore human, works on the Nexus 6s. While there, he meets CEO Eldon Rosen's niece, Rachel, and administers the Voight-Kampff test to her. Acquiring results prove difficult, but Deckard eventually discovers that she is an android. It is at this moment that the lines between real and artificial life become blurred for Deckard. Over the course of his hunt, Deckard becomes infatuated with Rachel, incorrectly assumes an ally he acquires is an android, and begins to feel empathy for the beings he gets paid to kill. Eventually, Deckard finishes the job after deciding that androids' inability to empathize makes them distinctly not human. From this point forward, I'm going to call Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep Dadoos because it's fun to say and it's much quicker. But the thing that defines humanity in Dadoos is the ability to empathize. This idea is most prevalent in Mercerism, the religion of protagonist Rick Deckard and the majority of the human race. Mercerism, originated by Wilbur Mercer, emerged after World War Terminus destroyed the Earth along with several of its inhabitants. After this tragedy, the goal of humans becomes preserving and valuing organic life. Mercerism's holy service involves individuals from across the globe using an empathy box to physically, mentally, and spiritually merge and engage in a hike. Once the individuals, now one, reach the peak, they are cast into the tomb world, a realm of decay, before being reborn and restarting their hike. Essentially, the point of Mercerism and its experiences is to make humans revel in each other's fortunes and mourn for each other's losses. This fosters community and is intended to prevent another catastrophic war. All biologically human characters in Dadoos have the ability to empathize, which reinforces their status as members of humanity. One of the main ways that humans exhibit empathy is by caring for animals. Deckard and his wife are deeply ashamed that they do not own a live animal. However, they and several others who cannot afford live animals purchase electric ones in order to perform the motions of caring for another living being. At one point, John Isidore, the main character of the B-plot, in which he harbors the escaped androids in his home, witnesses the death of a cat. The ordeal causes him a great deal of stress, and he feels determined to make sufficient amends to the distraught owner, revealing the emphasis placed on preserving life. Later, the androids hiding out in Isidore's apartment find a spider. Isidore is elated, as spiders were thought to be extinct. However, his guests do not feel this reverence for the creature's existence. Instead, they feel a cold curiosity, which causes them to remove 4 of the spider's legs to see if it can manage with half of its members. This instance is a clear indication of the robot's inhumanity. Unlike Isidore, they are unable to feel for the defenseless and somewhat miraculous arachnid, thus they are not human. Another instance in which a human character shows empathy for an animal occurs near the end of the piece after Deckard completes his hunt and embarks on a solo trip to the desert to contemplate the nature of life. He finds a toad, an animal important to Mercer and presumed to be extinct, and decides to adopt it as a pet. The human characters also exhibit empathy through their feelings toward replicants. For example, Deckard's wife Iran accuses him of being a murderer hired by cops. When he responds that he has never killed a human being, Iran agrees, saying, "Just those poor Andes," indicating that she has respect for life even if it's artificial. Additionally, Isidore attempts to befriend one of the escaped androids, Pris, offering to help her get settled. He later welcomes her friends. Even after deducing that Pris and her companions are androids, he decides to be their ally. Additionally, Deckard becomes infatuated with Rachel after noticing her near humanity. This interest causes him to question the morality of his mission, especially when it comes to executing Luba Luft, an android who escaped Earth to become an opera singer. Deckard has trouble finding fault in a being who seems to be alive and who only produces art for the world. Lastly, the dynamic between Deckard and Iran illustrates the human capacity to empathize. Deckard and Iran have a loyalty to each other. They understand each other's feelings even if they don't necessarily love each other romantically. For example, Deckard internalizes his wife's desire to own an animal, which motivates him to use the bounty he earns to buy a goat. Similarly, when Iran and Deckard discovered that the seemingly miraculous toad Deckard acquired in the desert is an electric, Iran orders electric flies so that Deckard still has the opportunity to care for his beloved souvenir. In contrast, androids do not value life in a natural way, even if it is their own. For example, when Deckard pulls a gun on Rachel after discovering she is aiding the fugitive android, she does not attempt to save herself because she believes doing so would be illogical. Androids' inability to resist when cornered reveals they do not value their own life, a sentiment which is crucial to empathy as it involves valuing others more than or as much as the self. Now, if you clicked on this video, you probably know the plot to this movie, but I'm going to go over it just in case. Released in 1982, Blade Runner has the same general premise as its source material. Rick Deckard is tasked with assassinating a group of androids, often referred to as replicants in the film, who have escaped from Mars. Deckard visits the Tyrell Corporation, the cinematic equivalent of the Rosen Corporation, to test the Voight-Kampff test on a Nexus 6. His first subject is Eldon Tyrell's niece, Rachel, who he determines is a replicant that believes she is human. Tyrell explains that Rachel is an experimental model programmed with false memories to make her reactions seem more human. This information sends Rachel into an existential crisis, and she later goes to confront Deckard at his apartment, where things soon turn romantic. This part kind of came out of nowhere to me, and I guess things got romantic just because he's Harrison Ford, and it was the 80s, so there's that. And they could have just been trying to follow the plot of the book a little more closely, where he does end up sleeping with Rachel, but that was under much different conditions, I feel like, so I think they just had sex because he's Harrison Ford. Anyway, back to the script. Deckard continues his quest for the deviant androids and eventually succeeds. However, he's conflicted by the last words of the rebel gang's leader, Roy, who claims his life experiences will be lost in time like tears and rain. Deckard then returns to his apartment and runs away with Rachel. Blade Runner defines humanity as a desire to control one's destiny. Instead of focusing on the empathy that binds human society, Blade Runner attempts to answer the question present in its source material's title, do androids dream, and if they do, of what? The escaped replicants in the movie answer this question by abandoning their positions of servitude on Mars and seeking a way to extend their 4-year lifespan. This reveals the androids have the desire and the ability to escape from their predetermined roles. Roy's final words, claiming that everything he ever did will be lost like tears and rain, illustrates his desire to make an impression on the universe. Additionally, Rachel's decision to abandon her uncle, really her creator, and go on the run with Deckard reveals replicants' capacity and willingness to do as they please. By showing humanity in a group considered to be subservient and subhuman, Blade Runner calls attention to similar practices in the real world. To be explicit, the replicants can be considered metaphors for minorities in Western society, women, or any number of oppressed peoples. Blade Runner 2049 is set 30 years after the events of Blade Runner and follows replicant bounty hunter Officer K. After discovering the bones of an android who seemingly died in childbirth, K is tasked with locating and disposing of the child to prevent social upheaval. However, the idea that a replicant can be born and not just made causes K to question the morality of android servitude. K discovers that the child is the product of the union between Rick Deckard, a man presumed to be human, and Rachel Rosen, the experimental model created by Eldon Tyrell. Eventually, K joins a group of replicants dedicated to protecting Deckard's now grown child and eradicating the present social system. Blade Runner 2049 expands on its predecessor's definition of humanity by bringing procreation into the question. It asserts that in addition to the desire for personal goals, humanity stems from the ability to create life. I do not mean to say that individual fertility is what makes one human, but the ability of people in general to produce new souls is integral to our existence as a species. If something, like Rachel and Deckard's child, is born, it is not made. Someone cannot say its characteristics were directly manufactured. This new being would have thoughts, motivations, and emotions not intended by the science that created it. In other words, it would have a soul, and the possession of a soul makes one undoubtedly human. This relates to the popular debate surrounding whether or not humans are simply machines whose feelings are nothing more than the chemical reactions in the brain. I feel the Blade Runner film states that artificial beings can have souls, thus actual humans definitely have souls. Personally, I believe people have souls, and this is partially the result of my religious beliefs. Altogether, Dadu's, Blade Runner, and Blade Runner 2049 define humanity as the ability to empathize, the wish for self-determination, and the capacity to bring unique life into the world. One has to be able to recognize the joys and sufferings of others in order to behave morally. Free will is a hallmark of existence, and the ability to produce life separate from one's own is considered an attribute, if not a necessity, in most societies. Overall, the 3 aforementioned stories tackled complex themes concerning human existence with an impactful style, and I recommend checking each of them out. Okay, I almost uploaded this video without saying a bunch of stuff that I wanted to say. For example, is Deckard an android? I think he is, because I think that K is supposed to be his sort of counterpart. So in the first Blade Runner, you have someone, a detective, trying to figure out the meaning of sentience, and then in Blade Runner 2049, you have a detective trying to figure out the meaning of sentience. So I think it would make sense for them both to be androids if they're like, not the same character, but like the equivalent character. Additionally, I think it would be kind of weird if Deckard was a human and then he had a baby with an android. I think even in high science fiction, there's still like a level of believability that they need to keep, and just like a human having a kid with a robot seems like a bit too far even for this, in my opinion. And like, it makes more sense to me that their baby would just be like a weird coding situation. I don't know. Joy, Kay's hologram girlfriend, I think that she is not sentient. I think she's just a program that's like not alive. And I think this because when she thinks Kay was born, when she thinks like he's the mystery baby that killed the android in childbirth or whatever, she says, oh, you need like a name and not just a letter to identify you. And she's like, what about Joe? And later when she dies, Kay interacts with the sort of advertisement version of her, like the giant one. And the advertisement version was like, hi Joe, it's been like a day or whatever. And so I think if she was really sentient, she would have came up with like another name, but it seems like she just used the name like from the factory setting. Like, oh, just call like every man you see Joe because it's generic or whatever. And that's really sad for Kay, that his girlfriend that he seemed to be in love with was not really alive. This is my first video essay. I am pretty nervous. I hope that this becomes pretty successful because my goal is to have a media cooperative for people of color. So basically, I have to figure out a way to get a lot of revenue so that I can support other creators. I know that for people of color, it's hard to, well, for anyone, it's hard to do creative projects and like actually be able to make a living from it, just because of the way our society is set up. It values productivity over creativity. And if you're a person of color, it becomes even harder to do things like that. And I'm like, why don't I start something where people of color could work together to sort of finance creative projects? Like on this channel, I want to do short films, and you know, if other people come on eventually, hopefully, they can also do short films, or they could do video essays, or they could do, I don't know, sketch comedy, like whatever they like. And yeah, I'm just really hoping this works out. I hope that you liked this video, and if you could please interact with it, give it a comment, give it a like, subscribe. That would really help me out and hopefully help out a lot of people in the future. All right, bye.